Check my settings. Oh, right. Okay. Let's try Facebook. This is scary stuff. Alexa, chair off. Okay, there we go. Okay, here we go. Ready? Yeah, okay. Now what? I did that. I told it to go. Why won't it? Why won't I tell it to go? Check my settings. I said go. Go. Go Facebook, I think. Somewhere maybe. Oh, jeez, sorry. I guess there was just like no hell. How do I get rid of it? And delete that video. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I do. Okay, now what? All right, here we go. Hi. I can't tell if I'm live or not. Let's see. Am I live? Can't tell. I hate this. Okay. Become Diaries. Here we go. Okay. Oh, I see. Yeah. Your favorite nighttime bed story for the night. Tonight we're talking about stalking and stalking cases. which is kind of a sad thing to do, but somebody has to talk about them, right? So, the first thing we're going to do, I want to just take a minute to talk to you about stalking and what stalking is all about, right? So, when you think about it, stalking, here's some statistics that you may or may not know about. 7.5 million people were stalked in 1 year in the U.S. 7.5 million. I'm sure that has gone up since the last time they checked. I think that they checked in, like 2015 maybe, so I'm sure it's gone up since then. 61% of female victims and 44% of male victims have been stalked, and it's by a current or a former intimate partner. That's a lot. An estimated 15% of women and 6% of men have been a victim of stalking during their lifetimes. 54% of female victims reported stalking to the police before they were killed by their stalkers. That's almost half of them, over half of them. That's really scary. Now we have some stalking laws and they're getting better at it, right? But it's still a problem. What are the results of stalking? There's been studies done and they're basically saying to you that anxiety, insomnia, social dysfunction, severe depression, it's much higher among victims of stalking than the general population, especially when it involves being followed or having your property destroyed. So just think about that for a second. But the case I want to tell you about tonight is the nightmare of Christine Belford Matusewicz. Now, I may have butchered that name, and I apologize if I did, but I believe it is Matusewicz. So I want to tell you a little bit about this case, this particular nightmare. It started simple enough. David Matusewicz met Christine Belford when he hired her in his optometry business to be the office manager. Christine had a daughter from a previous relationship, and her name was Kelly. And David welcomed them into his family. His father and mother were a part of it, and it's a big to-do. His father's name was Thomas. He was a former police officer. His mother was Lenore, and she was a housewife. And his sister, Amy Gonzalez, was a nurse. And these three people just, enveloped these two people and brought them in as part of the family, or so it seemed. So David and Christine married, and within 3 years they had 3 more daughters. Busy, busy people, right? So his mom and dad moved in to help with the small kids. Their daughter Lee was diagnosed with autism. And so that was kind of particularly helpful that mom and dad lived there too. But Christine wanted to follow, what the medical professionals said, what the doctors said. And of course, David is an optometrist. And he says, I'm a doctor. I know better. How it goes. Narcissistic men. Anyway, the mother-in-law, Lenore, started kind of intervening in these family dynamics. And she started treating the kids like they were her kids, not her grandkids. So she kind of apparently wanted to be the mother of these 3 young kids. Christine's a little resistant, of course, right? And at some point during this marriage, he's got guns. He was a survivalist. He's taken a 1-week shooting course in Vegas. He told Christine at one point, I know how to kill people and leave no trace. So Christine kind of becomes scared of this whole dynamic that we got going on. And she eventually filed for divorce after about 5 years. She moves out. She files for full custody. Well, this enrages everybody. The entire family is livid, right? So the judge said, well, you know what? No, we're not going to do that whole full custody thing with either one. So what we're going to do is a joint custody, and we're going to do a reasonable custody agreement. Christine's fine with it. What does David do? He immediately fires her from his optometrist office, leaving her with no income whatsoever. She moves in with a grandparent. David files for sole custody on the basis that she was a bad mother, she was verbally abusive, she was mean to the kids, all of this kind of stuff. The court said, no, I'm not seeing this. You're not showing me any proof that that's the truth. In fact, I'm seeing just the opposite. So here's your joint custody, live with it, get over it. David and his family, of course, are furious. So comes along about 2007, and David says, you know what, I want to take the kids and my mom to Disney World in Florida for 2 weeks. For a nice little vacation. Kristen was delighted. Hey, that's a great experience for the kids. They'll love Disney World. How awesome. Go with my blessing. Well, you know what happened, Mike. 2 weeks came and went. She tried to get in touch with David several times, and of course she's thinking, well, they're busy or they're on a ride and he can't hear the phone, and not a big deal. So they're due home, and they don't show up. So she's calling David and she's leaving messages, where are you? You promised to be here. What's going on? Is everybody okay? That kind of thing. She started panicking and she went to the local police department and she files a kidnapping charge on her ex-husband. The detective, bless his heart, he didn't do much because, that was a domestic issue, as they thought in those days. But he did call David and he left several messages. But after a couple of days, Christine brings in this custody agreement to the police department, and he kind of takes it a little bit more seriously, I guess. He called and talked to David's sister Amy and his father Thomas. But it was really strange because those two seemed to have the exact same story. So the detective is kind of suspicious. He's like, there's something just not quite right here. So he says, you know what, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to team with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Kids. They'll get the word out around Florida. They'll put up posters. They're really good at this, right? No problem. So that happened. But David was long gone. He was already outside of the country by that point. So the detective starts looking at David's financials. No credit card had been used since he left home. None. Not you're at Disney World. You're going to use a credit card. I could promise you that, right? He kept investigating further. He found out that David had sold his business for somewhere around $900,000. He also found that David had forged Christine's name on a loan of $249,000. Now, why $249? We're not so sure, but that's what it was. And he put all this money into offshore accounts, right? And then it became this pattern of moving this money, large sums of money, between the various members of the family. And when the detective finally got to one of the members of the family, he found out that there was an $80,000 Winnebago type, camper, big camper thing that was purchased as well. So at this point, the detective says, you know what, I'm calling the FBI because this is obviously more than just outside the state. At this point, Christina is very scared. She's scared for herself, she's scared for her children, and she's concerned that now we've got the FBI involved, which is great. But, oh my God, David and his family are going to come after me with a vengeance, right? So she's a little scared. They start getting tips, and Christine would fly off to see. No, that wasn't it either, and there were a lot of tips. The FBI followed up on all of them, but they didn't really pan out. All of a sudden, David's father and his sister pulls up and moved to South Texas, but they didn't tell anybody. They just did it. And we didn't find out for a couple of years, kind of thing, that they'd even moved. And they moved to South Texas near the border. Right? Strange, I think. Yes. The FBI tracks the money movement and the passports, and they find out that David at one point had been in Panama with the girls. So they start thinking, they're going to put a trace on Amy's cell phone. She's in South Texas. She's near the border. Maybe there's some kind of contact, right? So they found out that Amy was in contact with a real estate agent in Nicaragua to purchase a house for David. Well, fortunately, that was good for the FBI. They got the address of the house. They got all the information they needed where he was. So about 2009, David, his mother, Lenora, and the children were located in Nicaragua. David actually had one of the children in his car and was headed to take her to school, and they pulled him over, and that started the process. At this point, the kids are 4, 6, and 7, and remember, one of them is autistic, so this has got to be hard for them no matter what. But this particular arrest started a campaign by David and his family of total and complete terror. It was horrible what she had to go through. So after 19 months, the FBI finally catches up with David. Christine immediately flew to Nicaragua and reunited with her kids. But she was devastated to find out that David had told the girls that Christine had committed suicide. And that's why they would never see her again. And can you imagine the worst thing in the world that you can do to tell a child is that, their mom didn't care enough to stick around, right? That's just horrible. I think that's horrible. Anyway, she went and got the kids, and they go home to Delaware. And that's when it kind of starts. David and Lenore go to jail, for kidnapping and fraud and things like that. Now, while he's in jail this time, last time it didn't work by him saying she's a bad mother and all this. So this time when he's in jail, a few years later, he says, oh, well, the reason was Christine was sexually abusing our oldest daughter, right? I think he was just grasping at straw because it was absolutely unfounded and nothing else had worked, so why not try this, right? So the family, including Lenore and Amy, start this mail and email campaign. They had websites. They used YouTube. They posted things on the kids' school website, churches, neighbors, friends, and family. And they told everybody that Christine was a bad mother. And she was mentally ill, and she was abusing the kids. And all this, of course, played into what I'd call a game of telephone, where it grew and it grew and it grew, and before you know it, the facts were nothing like the real facts of the story, right? So while David and Lenore are in jail, and this stalking pattern is going on, he even got his ex-girlfriend from high school, her name was Tabitha, to participate by reaching out to Christine in sort of sympathy. Yeah, I remember what David was like. We dated in high school, blah, blah, blah. Well, Christine bought it. She had no idea that Tabitha was reporting everything back to David and his family. So now David and his family know a lot of intimate details about Christine and the girls, photos, where they are, what they're doing, and all of this is being reported back while they're in jail. So while they're in jail, the entire family starts gathering all of this information by manipulating as many people as they can find to assist them. They even got a real estate agent to give them complete details about Christine's house, the ingress, the egress, the entrance, the exits, the layout, the floor plan, everything, which is scary. So in September 2009, he's convicted of kidnapping and fraud finally, and he's sentenced to 4 years. Yeah, 4 years. 4 years. And then 18 months, for probation or something like that. Now, his mother only got 18 months for her participation. So in 2010, they both go to prison, right? He's going for 48 months. But he's released in 2012 to a halfway house. And eventually, of course, reunites with his family. So he serves, a couple of years, and that's it. Now, during this time, the family continues terrorizing Christine and began physical and online surveillance of everything that's going on in her life and the kids. Lenore was released, and Christine got scared, because Lenore continued her campaign of stalking with letters and emails, and she and Amy even posted videos. They would take some picture of Christine and the kids and manipulate it to look like Christine was being a bad mother. And then they would talk about what a horrible person she was. I mean, it's just awful. Finally, the court terminates David's rights, which of course terminates the family's access as well. And the court said on numerous occasions, now that, listen, there is no way that it's true about Christine's behavior. There's nothing to prove that she was a bad mother, nothing to prove that she sexually abused the kids, nothing to prove anything, right? Christine is so paranoid, she got security camera installed. She got a couple of very large dogs. She kept baseball bats and knives in her room at ready access. I mean, she's terrified. In 2012, David's released to Texas. Now, twice he tried to get his parole officer to let him go to New Jersey. Now, they lived in Delaware, but, he wanted to go to New Jersey for whatever reason. Parole officer said, no, that's not going to happen. So in April of 2012, um, basically he was allowed to go to Delaware because of the hearing, because he did file a hearing, a reduction of child support, and that came up, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So when he was released, he reunites with his family, and he's hit with a $60,000 back child support filing. Right? He's furious. I mean, absolutely beside himself furious. And now Christine's especially worried, and so she contacts the court, and she says, "Is there any way that I cannot appear for this hearing? You know, I don't want to see him. I don't want to be around him." They said no, she had to be there. Okay. So in November of 2012, he files this petition, this motion to decrease that back child support, and scheduled a hearing for February of 2013. And of course, his parole officer granted him permission to go with his mother, right? They would think that going with your mother would cause anybody any trouble, but they didn't know this family. So between February 4th and the 7th of 2013, they traveled to Delaware, and they took 2 vehicles. The vehicles later on were found to contain weapons and ammunition, thousands of rounds of ammunition, a shovel, handcuffs in sizes from large down to small, very small, bulletproof vests, restraints, electronic shock devices, gas cans, and tons of pictures of Christine and the kids in various places. One picture even showed Christine's house with like little arrows showing points of exit and entrance and things like that. So comes the hearing day, and this is where the rubber kind of meets the road, if you will. David and his father, Thomas, go into the lobby of the courthouse, and they have some conversation. Then David goes to the hearing room, and his father, Thomas, remains in the lobby area. There's a lot of commotion going on in the lobby. People are coming in to go to work, and, it's just a lot of people milling about, if you will. Christine and her friend arrive at the courthouse. Thomas walks in, pulls his gun, shoots Christine and her friend point blank, and kills them instantly. They didn't even reach the metal detectors yet. Chaos ensued, of course, and 2 additional police officers were shot, but they weren't life-threatening injuries, like one was in a leg and one was in an arm, things like that. Thomas is shot, and he goes right outside the doors, and he fell to the ground. Once he fell to the ground, he put the gun in his mouth, and he committed suicide, the coward. So a prosecutor came to the scene, and he found out that the police, among all of that evidence, the police also found a cattle prod and a red notebook with a hit list of anybody that had kind of crossed the family in this whole endeavor, right? David was arrested for violating parole because of the guns, and Lenore was also arrested because her car contained guns and evidence as well. The day after this hearing and this death, Amy, his sister, filed a petition for custody of the 3 kids. Yeah. However, in August of 2013, the entire family were indicted. Unfortunately, the sad part is the only person that could refute the child abuse claims was one of their daughters, Laura. She was 12 years old, and the kid did wonderfully well. She was a trooper. She testified that none of the abuse claims were true, that they were never treated badly, all of that. So, of course, the jury found them guilty and sentenced all 3 of them to life in prison. Now, here's a little bit about the aftermath. All 3 daughters have been in protective custody since the day their father was arrested, and they will remain there, probably forever. Their whereabouts are currently unknown at all. Lenore died in 2016 in jail. Now, I can't let this go without at least talking a minute about some of the things that you can do. If you need immediate assistance and you think that you're being stalked, you can start with the Victim Connect helpline. You can text, you can call, you can chat online, and they'll give you referrals of all for all victims. They'll help you, they'll talk to you, they'll tell you what the next step is. They can be reached online at victimconnect, victimconnect.org or by phone at 855-484-2846. 855-484-2846. Or, of course, if you need immediate assistance, you should always call 911 without a doubt. So, this has been the true story of, um, Christine Matusowitz and her horrific story of stalking. Stalking, is just a terrible, terrible crime, and many times it does result in death, and that makes it even sadder. If you want to learn more about our types of cases and what we talk about, you can check out our Facebook group. We're at Facebook/True Gosh, it's been a day. True Crime Diaries Discussion. True Crime Diaries Discussion. Or you can always check out our website at https://truecrimediaries.com. Or just email me at annie@truecrimediaries.com. Love to chat with you. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we do appreciate you listening. Talk to you soon. Bye.